The year is 1914. An expedition vessel carves its way through the freezing waters of the Atlantic Ocean, bound for a desolate, uncharted island. Aboard the ship is a young man named Friend. He's traveling to this isolated rock with a singular mission: to serve as a meteorologist for a full year, recording weather data before he's allowed to return home. Friend has already endured 67 grueling days at sea, and today is the final stretch. As the island finally looms on the horizon, the ship's captain, Axel, decides to personally escort the young man to his new temporary prison. They board a small skiff, battling the tide until they hit the rocky shore. Friend has dragged along enough rations to survive the year, but as they step onto the beach, an eerie silence greets them. Friend and Captain Axel are baffled. The previous weather official, a man named Aldous, was supposed to be waiting right here to catch a ride back with Axel. Instead, the island offers nothing but a towering ancient lighthouse and a rotting, abandoned cabin. This shack is where Friend is expected to survive the next 12 months. Sensing something is horribly off, Axel sends his crew back to the skiff and accompanies Friend up the rocky path to the lighthouse, hoping to uncover what happened to Aldous. On their way, they stumble upon a freshwater spring. Carved aggressively into the stone is the name Gruner, marking the water as someone's personal property. When they finally reach the lighthouse, they find it heavily fortified, completely surrounded by a brutal ring of sharpened wooden stakes. It's primitive, but effective. They hammer on the thick wooden door, demanding to speak to the guard. When dead silence is their only answer, they force the door open. Making their way to the top floor, they find the island's sole inhabitant, a grizzled guard named Gruner, fast asleep. Axel shakes him awake and immediately questions him about Aldous. Gruner coldly claims the man contracted typhoid, went mad, and wandered straight into the freezing ocean to die. Axel doesn't buy a single word of it. His gut tells him something is deeply wrong here. He turns to Friend, begging the young man to abandon the mission and return to the ship. But Friend refuses. He came here to do a job. Before leaving, Axel shoves a pistol into Friend's hand for protection. Friend pushes it away, insisting he won't need it. With a final, reluctant farewell, Axel leaves him to his fate. Alone, Friend takes a hard look at his grim reality. 12 months of solitary confinement on a barren rock, sharing an island with a man who is clearly unhinged, all just to track wind currents? Resigned, he cleans up the filthy cabin and sets up his equipment. As night falls, he rummages through the desk and discovers a hidden diary belonging to Aldous. Huddled by the fire, he flips through the pages. The first entries are harmless sketches of local marine life, but then a photograph slips out. It's a picture of a beautiful woman with the word love scribbled frantically on the back 3 times. Friend realizes this was Aldous's wife, and the isolation must have been tearing the man apart. But as he turns the pages, the sketches turn into nightmares. Detailed drawings of grotesque amphibious creatures slaughtering humans fill the book. Friend brushes it off, assuming the crushing loneliness drove Aldous into a paranoid delirium. Exhausted, he finally falls asleep. The next morning, Friend gets to work, but while taking weather readings near the shoreline, he freezes. Arranged perfectly in the sand are intricate geometric circles of rocks, heavily decorated with seashells. Nature didn't do this. He assumes the eccentric Gruner must be killing time and ignores it. Later, while working, he hears Gruner shouting from the lighthouse balcony. Friend pulls up his binoculars and is stunned to see a second figure standing beside Gruner, a figure that vanishes in a split second. Blaming his lack of sleep, Friend convinces himself he's hallucinating. But late that night, a heavy knock echoes through the cabin. Friend assumes Gruner has come for a visit, but the knocking quickly morphs into a frantic, violent scratching. His blood runs cold. He creeps toward the door, only to see a terrifying, webbed hand sliding through the gap underneath. It looks exactly like the monsters in the diary. Reacting on pure adrenaline, Friend smashes the hand and sprints down into the cellar, barricading himself in the dark. Above him, the front door gives way. He hears the heavy, wet footsteps of the creature hunting for him. Peering through a crack in the floorboards, Friend holds his breath. Suddenly, an eye locks onto his. Friend thrusts a knife upward, plunging it straight into the creature's eye. It unleashes a deafening screech and bolts from the cabin. Trembling with sheer terror, Friend realizes the diary wasn't fiction, the monsters are real. He barricades the cellar door and stays wide awake until dawn. When the sun finally rises, Friend cautiously steps outside. The sand is completely covered in webbed footprints leading straight back into the ocean. The horrifying truth sets in. Gruner didn't build that wooden fortress around the lighthouse to keep people out. He built it to survive. Friend's flimsy wooden cabin is a death trap. He sprints to the lighthouse, pounding on the heavy door, screaming for Gruner, but Gruner just dumps a bucket of water on his head, sneering that Friend never should have stayed, and tells him to go to hell. With no other choice, Friend races back to the cabin and transforms it into a bunker. He violently nails heavy planks over every window, drives sharp wooden stakes deep into the dirt around the perimeter, and digs a massive trench right in front of the door. He dumps every book and newspaper he owns into the pit, soaking it all in highly flammable liquid. His trap is set. Inside, he scours the cabin and strikes gold, a dusty wooden crate holding a rifle and ammunition. He loads the weapon, aims at the window, and waits for the sun to drop. As darkness coats the island, Friend looks out the cracked window and his heart stops. Emerging from the black ocean is an absolute army of creatures, all sprinting at terrifying speeds straight for his cabin. They hit the perimeter like a tidal wave, shredding his wooden stakes to splinters and clawing at the walls. Friend opens fire. The thunder of the rifle drops several of them, but the gunfire doesn't scare them, it enrages them. More keep coming. Desperate, Friend strikes a match and ignites the soaked paper in the trench. A massive wall of fire erupts. The flames terrify the creatures, sending them shrieking back toward the ocean. But Friend's victory is short-lived. The blaze catches the wooden door, and within seconds the entire cabin is consumed by an uncontrollable inferno. Choking on smoke, Friend realizes he can't stop it. He wraps himself in a heavy blanket and barely escapes the burning structure, diving behind a massive boulder. As he catches his breath, he looks down and sees his hand is badly torn open. Shivering, bleeding, and staring at the smoldering ashes of his only shelter, Friend hits rock bottom. But the island shows a rare sliver of mercy. A sudden, violent rainstorm rolls in, drowning the remaining flames. The next morning, Friend returns to the charred remains of his cabin. Wrapping his bloody hand in a dirty handkerchief, he grabs his rifle and makes a choice. He's taking the lighthouse. He sneaks up to the water fountain, waiting for Gruner. When the old man appears, Friend raises the rifle, ready to threaten him for shelter. But out of nowhere, a creature lunges at Friend, tackling him to the dirt. He kicks it off, raising his rifle to blow its head off. "Drop the weapon," Gruner barks, stepping into view with his own gun aimed directly at Friend's head. Friend refuses, demanding Gruner lower his gun first so he can kill the monster. Surprisingly, Gruner complies. He lowers his weapon and casually asks what Friend wants. "I'm moving into the lighthouse," Friend declares, sweetening the deal by mentioning his massive stockpile of untouched food and water. Gruner agrees. Then he drops a bombshell. He explains that the creature standing there is completely harmless. It's a female, and she is his pet. To prove it, Gruner clicks his tongue. The terrifying monster obediently trots over to him, standing by his side like a loyal dog. The two men head back to the ruined cabin to salvage every can of food and drop of water they can carry. While packing, Friend finally confronts Gruner. He states the obvious. Aldous didn't die of typhoid. The creatures killed him, and Gruner let it happen by locking himself in the lighthouse and abandoning the man. Gruner doesn't say a word. The silence is deafening. Shifting focus, Friend insists they need to haul the supplies back before the sun goes down. Later that night, exhausted in the safety of the lighthouse, Friend falls into a deep sleep. He's jolted awake by a strange, wet sensation. The female creature is gently licking his infected hand. Terrified, he yanks his arm away. Gruner walks in and asks if the wound feels better, casually explaining that the creature's saliva has miraculous healing properties. Gruner heads upstairs to count their ammunition, and Friend follows, demanding to know how the old man tamed a monster. Gruner coldly replies that he just gives her orders. Friend points out that Gruner treats the creature with sickening cruelty. Gruner smirks, noting that she accepts the abuse because she's never tried to run away. He reveals he caught her in a fishing net when she was just an infant. She was drowning, and he saved her life at the last possible second. She's been bound to him ever since. Friend is deeply fascinated. He cautiously steps closer to her, theorizing aloud about isolated marine evolution. Sensing his genuine curiosity, the creature steps toward him, but Gruner snaps. Overcome with sudden jealousy, he drags Friend out to the balcony. He explains that the monsters violently despise bright light, but his pet is the sole exception because he conditioned her to it from infancy. Friend stares at the endless ocean and asks the million-dollar question, "Why didn't you leave on my ship?" Gruner smiles. Here, on this miserable rock, he is a king. Gruner turns the question back, "Why did you leave the real world?" Friend admits he did it for the paycheck, adding that if things get too rough, he'll just signal the next passing ship. Gruner bursts into cruel laughter. He looks Friend dead in the eye and tells him the brutal truth. They are completely off the nautical grid. No ships pass this island. Ever. Friend is trapped for exactly 1 year. Accepting his grim reality, Friend unpacks his surviving gear. He notices the creature watching him intensely. To offset Gruner's daily cruelty, Friend treats her with gentle kindness. But there's no time to relax. As night falls, Gruner shoves a gun into Friend's chest. Balcony, now. Gruner quickly breaks down the rules of engagement. Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes, and only put 1 bullet in each target. If you wound one, the rest of the pack will cannibalize it, buying them time. Suddenly, Friend looks up and sees the female creature standing at the absolute peak of the lighthouse. She throws her head back and unleashes a haunting, deafening shriek out to the black ocean. She is calling them. The water erupts. The horde charges the lighthouse. Gruner opens fire with ruthless efficiency, but Friend freezes. Pure panic paralyzes his body. He drops his weapon, scrambles back inside, and huddles in a corner, watching Gruner butcher the creatures until Friend's mind shuts down and he completely blacks out. The next morning, Friend jolts awake as a bucket of freezing water hits his face. Gruner is towering over him, absolutely livid. He makes it crystal clear there are no free rides on his island. Friend will pull his weight, starting with hauling water from the spring. Humiliated, Friend obeys. But that night, Gruner tells him to gear up again. It's his final test. They step out onto the balcony, but the second the horde emerges from the surf, Gruner steps back inside, slams the heavy metal door, and locks it. Friend is trapped outside. It's kill or be killed. When dawn breaks, Gruner cracks the door open. Friend is slumped against the wall, drenched in alien blood, gasping for air. He survived. From that bloody night on, a miserable routine sets in. The days bleed together in endless crushing boredom, while the nights are spent fighting for their lives. Friend begins scratching a tally of days into the stone wall. He laughs at the irony. He came to the edge of the world for peace and quiet and walked straight into a war zone. Yet a strange pattern emerges. The creatures don't attack every night. In fact, 2 full weeks pass without a single raid. Looking for any distraction, Friend scavenges the beach and discovers a massive whale skeleton. He harvests the bones, meticulously carving them into small, beautiful sculptures. Through the quiet days, his bond with the creature deepens. He names her Anaris. One evening, the silence lures them into a false sense of security. Friend and Gruner are locked in an intense game of chess. They are so focused that they completely forget to ignite the massive lighthouse lamp. The mistake is fatal. The creatures scale the dark tower and smash through the windows. It's absolute chaos. Outnumbered and overwhelmed, the 2 men fight a bloody retreat of the winding stairs, finally barricading themselves in the lantern room. During the scramble, Gruner's leg is ripped open. Bleeding out and out of ammo, they accept they're going to die. But as the sun peaks over the horizon, the creatures abandon the siege and slip back into the ocean. Anaris immediately tends to Gruner, using her saliva to seal his horrific wound. But Friend delivers the bad news. They are practically out of bullets. If they don't change tactics, the next attack will be their last. Desperate for answers, Friend wanders the shoreline. Half buried in the sand, he finds a crude necklace. It clearly belongs to one of the creatures. Suddenly, a blare cuts through the wind. A ship. A massive vessel is cruising along the horizon. Friend's heart explodes in his chest. He sprints toward the lighthouse, screaming for the flare gun, but Gruner tackles him to the dirt, viciously pinning him down. He refuses to let anyone discover his kingdom. Seeing Gruner assault Friend, Anaris shrieks at the old man. Friend is left lying in the sand, watching his only ticket home vanish over the horizon. Days later, the tension hits a boiling point. Friend hears Gruner violently screaming and hitting chasing Anarus. Terrified, she flees the lighthouse. Friend tracks her down the beach, but she recoils, terrified of his rifle. Showing complete submission, Friend places his gun on a rock and approaches her with empty hands. He pulls out a tiny, perfectly carved whalebone boat and offers it to her. Mesmerized, Anarus leads Friend far down the coastline, pointing to a half-buried, abandoned rowboat. Friend rushes back to the lighthouse, demanding to know why Gruner hid the boat. Gruner scoffs, calling it a suicide vessel. He claims a Portuguese sailor used it to escape a shipwreck, only to be slaughtered by the creatures on the beach. But Friend catches the lie. Gruner previously swore no ships ever sailed these waters. Cornered, Gruner admits the wrecked ship was a rogue vessel smuggling illegal dynamite. Friend's eyes go wide. Dynamite? He unearths an antique heavy metal diving suit and proposes a crazy plan: walk the ocean floor and salvage the explosives. Gruner flat out refuses, claiming it's a death sentence. But the next day, Gruner spots Friend swimming playfully with Anarus in a secluded lagoon. Consumed by toxic jealousy, Gruner returns to the lighthouse, kicks the heavy diving helmet at Friend, and agrees to the mission. But his motive is entirely sinister. He fully expects the ocean to kill his rival. They row out to the wreck. Friend seals the heavy helmet, drops into the freezing abyss, and locates the crates. He ties them off, and Gruner hauls them up. But out of the murky gloom, two juvenile creatures swim directly toward him. Panicking, Friend stumbles backward, the immense weight of the suit pinning him to the ocean floor. He desperately yanks the oxygen tether, the universal signal for an emergency pull. Topside, Gruner feels the frantic tugs. He looks at the rope, looks at the water, and does absolutely nothing. Suffocating, Friend is forced to unseal his suit underwater, abandoning the heavy gear and swimming for his life to the surface. Back at the lighthouse, they pry the crates open. The first few are completely waterlogged and useless, but the remaining boxes are bone dry. They're back in business. They wire the explosives into two massive kill zones right outside the front door. Winter violently hits the island. Snow buries the beach, and for weeks the creatures vanish. The waiting drives Gruner insane. One freezing morning, Friend finds Gruner on the balcony, his hand gripping the detonator plunger, half frozen to death. Friend gently pries his fingers off the trigger, orders him inside, and quietly unplugs the detonator wires. After 3 weeks of dead silence, Gruner snaps. Convinced Anarus warned the Horde about the bombs, he brutally beats her. Friend intervenes, shoving Gruner back. He realizes waiting is killing them. They need to force the enemy's hand. They need a trap. That night, they leave the heavy iron door of the lighthouse wide open. Friend stands guard at the threshold. High above in the lantern room, Gruner forces Anarus to scream out to the ocean. The bait works. A lone scout enters the dark doorway and lunges at Friend. Friend drops it with a single brutal strike, then falls back up the spiral stairs, firing down into the absolute flood of monsters pouring into the base. Upstairs, Gruner slams the detonator plunger, but nothing happens. The wires are cut. Panicking, he fights for his life as the Horde swarms the top floor. Friend finally breaks through the chaos, grabs the loose wires, and violently connects them. He slams the plunger. The first batch of dynamite erupts, vaporizing the front line of the Horde. Intoxicated by the carnage, Gruner slams the plunger a second time. The massive shockwave shatters the lighthouse glass and knocks both men completely unconscious. The next morning, the island is a graveyard. They step outside into the smoking crater. Gruner walks through the carnage, coldly executing any creature still twitching. Friend can't stomach it. He looks down and sees another crude necklace wrapped around a dead creature's neck. It hits him like a freight train. These aren't mindless beasts. They have culture. They feel grief. They are intelligent. He tries to explain this to Gruner, but the old man just rips the necklace off the corpse and tosses it into the sea. That night, the attack never comes, but the silence is broken by a haunting sound. Anarus has fled the lighthouse, and from the darkness of the beach they hear her weeping. Friend knows she's mourning her slaughtered family. Gruner dismissively claims it's just a phase, and she'll be crawling back by morning. Determined to bridge the gap, Friend walks the beach the next day. He spots two creature children playing in the surf. Taking a massive risk, he builds a circle of stones on the sand and places his beautiful carved bone boat in the center, a peace offering. He retreats to the lighthouse, watching through his binoculars. The boat remains untouched, but the next morning changes everything. Friend finds Gruner passed out in a drunken stupor. Rummaging through the mess, Friend finds the photograph of the woman again, but this time it's the full picture. Standing right next to the beautiful woman is Gruner. Friend flips the photo. Love, love, love. The horrifying truth clicks into place. Gruner is Aldous. The soul-crushing isolation and the loss of his wife fractured his mind, transforming a lonely meteorologist into a tyrannical monster. Deeply shaken, Friend realizes he is staring at his own future. Terrified of losing his humanity, he grabs a rag and violently scrubs his daily tally marks off the stone wall. At dusk, Friend walks back to the beach. The carved boat is gone. Suddenly, one of the creature children steps out of the shadows. To prove he isn't a threat, Friend drops his flaming torch and backs away. The child approaches him. From the dark ocean, dozens of creatures slowly emerge, including Anarus. The child steps up to Friend, holding out the carved boat to return it. It's a moment of pure, silent peace. Bang! A gunshot shatters the silence. Gruner marches down the beach, smoking rifle in hand. Friend steps between the old man and the horde, begging him to stop. He tells Gruner they were wrong. The creatures just want to be left alone. Gruner ignores him, ordering Anarus to return to her master. For the first time, she disobeys. She stands her ground. Enraged by her defiance, Gruner storms back to the tower, muttering his dark mantra, "No one leaves Gruner." Desperate to save the truce, Friend drops to his knees, trying to play with the child, but Gruner appears on the balcony with the flare gun. He fires a burning projectile straight into the crowd, striking and killing a creature instantly. The horde panics and flees into the black water. Anarus turns to Friend. She gives him one last devastating look of absolute heartbreak and vanishes into the ocean. Friend snaps. He sprints up the lighthouse stairs and tackles Gruner. A brutal, bloody brawl ensues, but the grizzled old man overpowers him, grabbing a heavy axe to finish Friend off. Pinned to the floor, staring at the blade, Friend plays his last card. "Aldous!" he screams. "Aldous isn't a killer." The name hits the old man like a physical blow. The madness in Gruner's eyes cracks. He drops the axe, his hands trembling as he quietly repeats the word love 3 times. Broken and hollow, Aldous walks out of the lighthouse and down to the water's edge. He stands perfectly still, surrendering himself to the ocean. The creatures swarm the beach, dragging him into the depths to finally claim their vengeance. Hearing the screams fade, Friend slowly pushes the heavy iron door shut and locks it. He is officially the last man on the island. Months bleed into seasons. The year finally expires. In the dead of winter, 3 naval officers enter the lighthouse. They find Friend asleep in Aldous' old bed. They shake him awake, announcing they are the relief crew sent to replace him. They address him as Gruner. Friend pauses. He looks at the men and slowly nods. He doesn't correct them. He tells the officers that the weather official died of typhoid and walked into the sea. Friend rises from the bed and steps out onto the balcony, looking down at the massive, heavily armed warships anchored in his bay. A dark, sarcastic smile slowly creeps across his face. He isn't going back to civilization. He is the new king of the island. Far out in the freezing water, Anarus watches the iron ships floating in her ocean. Realizing the humans have brought their ultimate weapons, she turns and dives deep into the abyss, swimming frantically to warn her people. The real war is just beginning. The screen cuts to black. That's it for today's story. If you enjoyed the recap, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.